The stage lights burned bright as the world watched. A high-profile international policy panel was being broadcast live across multiple networks, with millions tuning in from Washington, London, Ottawa, and beyond. It was supposed to be a calm discussion about North American trade and economic resilience. But something strange was in the air, something tense, sharp, electric. Sitting on stage were experts and officials from around the world, including Karoline Leavitt, a rising star in U.S. politics known for her bold, unfiltered opinions, and Mark Carney, the former governor of both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, a man famous for his calm and control. When the two were placed only 2 seats apart, some viewers felt a quiet anticipation, like the air before a storm. The moderator introduced the topic. Karoline jumped in early, speaking with a confident smile and sharp tone. "Let's not pretend," she said, "that Canada's economy is anything more than America's polite attic. Cold, quiet, and full of forgotten stuff." A few in the crowd laughed nervously. Their universal health care is just glorified paperwork. Their environmental policies, a theater of wokeness. As she continued, mocking Canada's political system, Carney sat still. He folded his hands. His eyes never moved from her. When she finished, the room expected him to smile politely and shift the conversation back. He didn't. Carney turned toward her, his voice low, steady, and quiet, but somehow it cut through the air like a blade. "It's interesting," he said, "how someone so unfamiliar with global economics can speak so confidently about a country whose institutions routinely outrank America's in stability, trust, and cooperation." The audience fell silent. Carney continued, still calm. "While you mock universal health care, Canadians live longer. While you sneer at environmental responsibility, Canada leads in green innovation. And while you wave flags," he paused, "we build consensus." The moderator tried to interrupt, sensing the room shift. But Carney raised a hand gently. "Let's talk numbers," he said. "Canada has held a triple-O credit rating through every global crisis in 2 decades. During the 2008 crash, it was Canadian banks that were the model of restraint. But please, go on. Tell me how weak we are." A gasp. Silence. Then hushed applause from a few audience members who couldn't hold it back. Karoline blinked. For the first time in her media-hardened life, she looked unprepared. She laughed nervously. "Well, I guess you've memorized your country's Wikipedia page." Carney didn't smile. He replied, "I don't memorize facts. I lead with them." Cameras zoomed in. The moment was already being clipped by phones in the audience. Before the panel even ended, the video hit social media. TikTok called it the Canadian Smackdown. Twitter lit up with threads. YouTube. Replays hit 1 million views in hours. But while the internet exploded with jokes and memes, something else happened quietly. At a private intelligence monitoring station in Brussels, 2 analysts flagged Carney's exact words. A phrase he used, "lead with them," matched an old encryption tag used in Five Eyes communications. Was this more than a debate? Was he sending a signal? In Langley, Virginia, a CIA officer paused while reading a real-time transcript of the panel. He underlined 3 sentences. "He's activating something," he muttered. On the surface, it was a viral political moment. Underneath, it was the opening shot of something far more serious. And somewhere in London, a secure phone rang. The message was short. "It's begun." The clip of Mark Carney's takedown of Karoline Leavitt spread faster than wildfire. Within 6 hours, it was trending in over 40 countries. News anchors replayed it on loops. Headlines screamed across platforms. "Canada strikes back." Mark Carney's mic drop moment. Karoline. Crumbles live. But beneath the viral storm, a quieter world was moving fast. In a glass tower in downtown Toronto, Carney stood in a private conference room. The blinds were drawn. His expression was unreadable as he scrolled through encrypted messages on his secure tablet. Simple phrase repeated again and again from agents across the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance received. Signal confirmed. Awaiting coordinates. He turned to the man standing silently near the window, a former MI6 operative now working under diplomatic cover. They saw it, Carney said. It's time. Meanwhile, in Washington, Karoline Leavitt was under pressure. She'd laughed off the confrontation during the panel, but privately, her team was in chaos. Her chief of staff had received over 700 interview requests, but it wasn't the media she was worried about. It was the message left anonymously in her inbox that morning. One sentence typed in plain Arial font. You've triggered something you don't understand. She dismissed it as a prank until the second message arrived. This time, it was a screenshot of a private flight log. It showed her name, her departure from D.C., her landing in New York Times accurate to the second. Someone was watching. Someone wanted her to know it. Back in Ottawa, the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor had received an urgent briefing. Carney's remarks had been traced by algorithms used to detect coded language in international broadcasts. His phrase, "We build consensus," had been flagged in connection to an old operation buried in the archives Project Lantern, a dormant intelligence network formed after the 2008 crash to monitor economic sabotage attempts. But Lantern had been deactivated years ago, or so they thought. Carney, still calm in public, was now moving behind the scenes. He met quietly that evening with a former CIA liaison who had relocated to Montreal after leaving Langley. Conversation was short, precise, and layered with meaning. They know now, the agent said. Good, Carney replied. Now we see who moves first. Karoline, still fuming but unsure why, finally agreed to a sit-down interview with a major network. She expected questions about trade, image control, maybe even jokes. Instead, the host leaned in and said, "You've upset someone very powerful. Do you believe Carney's response was personal or planned?" She tried to keep her face steady. It was political theater, that's all. But the host pressed further. Then why did a Canadian satellite link temporarily cut out minutes after the panel? Why are your internal staff now being vetted by the State Department? Why is NATO intelligence suddenly reviewing trade conference transcripts? She had no answers. She ended the interview early. That night, a small server farm in Estonia picked up unusual activity. A dormant channel marked LANT7 activated for the first time in a decade. No sender, no location. Just a string of characters. Consensus has broken. Begin recovery. Back in London, Carney sat alone in his study, watching the panel replay with the sound muted. His phone buzzed once. A name appeared. He hadn't seen it in years. E. Vickers code for approved. He leaned back. What began as a debate had become something else entirely. The world had watched a verbal battle. But behind it, something old and powerful had been shaken awake. New York was unusually quiet for a Wednesday, the kind of silence that hangs before a storm. Inside the UN building, diplomats whispered in marble hallways, while security teams paced with the unease of men who knew something was coming, but not from where. In a secure sublevel conference room, 3 men and 1 woman gathered around a glowing projection of the words Echo Ledger. The CIA had decrypted enough of the document to piece together a basic outline, a multi-pronged campaign to destabilize economic alliances through weaponized media narratives, seeded by AI-generated influencers and backed by shell corporations operating out of Hong Kong, Dubai, and Ankara. But one name kept appearing in the metadata. Not a company, not a country. Carney, a senior advisor to the U.S. National Security Council, leaned forward, voice tight. Is this man a double agent, or the only firewall we've got left? Back in Geneva, Mark Carney stood at the edge of Lake Lehman, hands in his coat pockets, watching swans float over glassy water. He had the face of a man who knew the world wasn't just slipping, it was being pushed. Behind him, Alina Borodin lit a cigarette and whispered, "They'll come for you. You made yourself visible. And leave it." She doesn't even know what role she's playing. Carney turned calm, but colder now. It's not the threat. She's the echo. It's what's inside the signal that matters. At that same moment, Karoline Leavitt landed in Zurich. She had booked the flight under a false passport, tracing the number she had been texted days ago. Geneva. The message had burned itself into her thoughts, looping like a warning. Or maybe a command. A man met her at the terminal. Older, unshaven, with eyes that had seen war not through screens, but through rifle scopes. "You're late," he said. "For what?" she asked. "Understanding." He led her through side streets and train platforms until they reached an old townhouse near Carouge. There, she met someone she hadn't seen in years, Sam Heller, a journalist she once dated, who had vanished after publishing an exposé on off-book defense spending. Sam didn't say hello. He turned a laptop toward her and pressed play. The screen showed footage she had never seen before. It was her panel debate with Carney, but ... extended. The part that wasn't broadcast. It showed her pausing mid-sentence, her pupils dilating, her voice slightly flattening. And as she said the words, "polite attic." But the voice intonation was off. Subtly, behind her voice was a hum. An audio watermark. "Deep fake?" she asked. Sam shook his head. "No. Worse, it was live. You were real. But something altered you, like you were nudged into saying a line someone else wrote." Karoline felt dizzy. "You're saying I was programmed. I'm saying you were primed. You read from a prepared statement?" "Yes, but something inside that statement activated a cognitive shift. That phrase, it's embedded with mnemonic. Triggers tied to classified propaganda methods developed by a now-defunct NATO project called Orpheus Lens. Why me?" she whispered. Sam didn't answer. In Washington, a backshot alert fired across encrypted diplomatic lines. "Orpheus. Lens has been breached. Echo ledger active. Canada is the fault line." By midnight, 5 major G7 embassies entered soft lockdown. London, Berlin, Ottawa, Tokyo, and Paris all scrambled for internal reviews of their press briefings, public contracts, and diplomatic statements over the last 30 days. It was no longer about a viral video. It was about how that video had been used and who had crafted it. Karoline sat in silence, staring at the paused video frame of herself, eyes locked, mouth open mid-sentence. And then behind her, she saw something she hadn't noticed before. A man in the audience, not clapping, not laughing, just watching. The same man who met her in Zurich. She turned to Sam. "Who is he?" Sam's face lost all color. His name's not on any manifest. No seat registered. No name in the system. But he's in 3 other footage frames. Davos, Jakarta, and Brussels. Always front row, always during these PHR. Always during these... Spike's Karoline's hands trembled. "Then who is he?" Sam looked at her, voice almost a whisper. "The author of the ledger." And somewhere in a dark hotel room in Vienna, the man from the audience stared at 6 screens. One of them showed Karoline, another, Carney, a third, a loading bar slowly filling beneath the word activation. The storm was coming, but it had already started. The man's real name wasn't in any known database, not MI6. Not the CIA, not even Mossad's deep ghost registry. But somewhere, buried under 14 layers of encryption inside an old NATO failsafe program, there was a code name, the Auditor. He didn't issue commands. He triggered protocols. Protocols designed decades ago in the shadow of Cold War paranoia. When nations feared not nuclear bombs, but narrative collapse, the quiet unraveling of truth itself. And now, as his screen blinked green, as activation completed its cycle, the world was about to step into a phase it had no name for. In London, Mark Carney arrived at a private banking summit not to speak, but to listen. In his pocket was a drive with the remaining pieces of the Echo Ledger. Not the versions leaked to journalists or passed through signal chats, but the original chain, the raw intelligence, the kind of file that makes governments fall. Waiting for him at the back entrance was a woman in an MI5 jacket who wasn't. Actually, MI5, her name was Alina Reyes, a freelance information broker, who had once been paid by 4 countries in the same month to sell them different versions of the same document. She handed Carney a sealed envelope. Zurich confirmed the trigger. It started. Carney didn't flinch. "Leavitt?" he asked. In the wind. But someone pulled her file from Canadian archives. Someone high. Carney opened the envelope. Inside, a photo, Karoline as a child with a woman who was not her mother. A flag in the background, not American. Not Canadian. Eastern European, possibly Belarusian. "She's not who she thinks she is," Alina said. "She never was," Carney replied, pocketing the photo. Meanwhile, in Vienna, Karoline stood inside a soundproofed room beneath an abandoned opera house. The walls were padded, but the floor buzzed faintly with power. Across from her stood the man from the panel, the one who never clapped, never blinked. "You were chosen," he said softly. "I wasn't told anything," Karoline snapped. "You didn't need to be. You were trained through exposure. Language, stress, ideology. All it took was one phrase to open the door." "What door?" He smiled, not with warmth, but inevitability. "The one that lets you remember." And with that, he placed a tablet in her hands. It played a video. From 10 years ago, a training session. A facility, children, her speaking French, then Russian, reciting lines. "The bear sleeps while the eagle forgets." Karoline backed away. "No, that's not me. It was, and it still is. You're the carrier, Karoline. The ledger isn't just code, it's embedded. In people, in memories. In Berlin, A. Coded signal activated underground AI clusters meant to monitor trade data across Europe. But this time, the AI didn't track market trends, it traced voices, political speeches, podcast interviews, YouTube videos looking for mimics. Dozens were flagged. People in power unknowingly repeating trigger phrases buried in seemingly harmless policy statements. The AI detected a pattern. Someone had laced speech itself with networked cognitive interference, and the epicenter. The panel Carney received. The alert mid-train to Brussels. He leaned back and whispered, "They're using her as a relay." Back in Vienna, Karoline dropped the tablet. "Why me?" "It's a man." The auditor stepped closer. "Because you're both sides of the argument. Nationalist, insider, outsider. Your mind was engineered to hold contradiction. That's what makes you powerful and dangerous." Karoline's voice trembled. "Then what am I now?" "You are the activation key, and you've already turned." She felt it then, not fear, but clarity. The words she had spoken weren't hers, but they fit. It's like puzzle pieces sliding into place. Her hands stopped shaking. She looked up. "What happens next?" The man turned to the screen. It showed Carney entering the EU Parliament building. The auditor said, "Now we find out who breaks first, the truth, or the system's built to. Protect it." And somewhere across 6 capitals, firewalls began to blink. Servers stalled. Words were becoming weapons. The countdown had already started. The email hit every major newsroom in the world at the same time. No subject line, just a video file, no trace of sender. No metadata. Every forensic tool said the same thing: it had never been created, but it existed. And once it started playing, no one could look away. It was the full footage from the Vienna facility. Karoline Leavitt, standing inside a chamber that looked like a former NATO command bunker. Eyes locked with a man the file only identified as Auditor Zero. Her voice clear, calm, unwavering, reciting a series of phrases in 5 different languages. A linguistic code sequence. But not just any code. These phrases aligned perfectly with historical intelligence triggers, some dating back to the Cold War, others completely new. Across multiple agencies, the reaction was chaos. U.S. intelligence labeled it cognitive warfare. The UK called it PSOP's exposure protocol. The Canadian government invoked something called Directive 77, a response file that hadn't been touched since the fall of the Berlin Wall. But Mark Carney was already one step ahead. He had left Brussels the moment the video dropped, not by train, not by plane, by a diplomatic vehicle routed through the Ardennes with a secure comms rig wired into a satellite net not even Starlink could see. Inside the car, Carney was watching, not the footage, but the ripple. The analytics. How fast it spread. Who shared it first? Which phrases the AI flagged? Karoline's activation had started something, but it wasn't a war. It was a test. Someone, somewhere, had been waiting to see how many systems could be overwhelmed by weapons. But by language. In Washington, emergency meetings were held. Senators demanded to know if a foreign power had mind-controlled one of their rising stars. But Carney knew better. Karoline wasn't brainwashed. She was the product of a buried program, one that never officially existed. Called Project Halcyon. It was built in the 90s. After the fall of the Soviet Union, when the West feared chaos more than conflict, the idea was simple. Engineer communicators so effective they could break consensus without force. Infiltrate. Media rise in politics, then tip the scales with a single sentence. Karoline had been one of the first prototypes. She had no idea till the panel. But now, she knew everything. Somewhere in an undisclosed Scandinavian port. A private vessel anchored just outside international waters. On board was Karoline, staring at a wall of monitors. She had been rescued or extracted, depending on who you asked. The auditor had disappeared. No trace, but he'd left behind the rest of the Echo ledger. And as Karoline read through it, line by line, her hands didn't shake. She had been angry for so long. At the world, at institutions, at systems she believed had failed people. But now she understood those systems were designed to fail, slowly, quietly, elegantly. And her voice, once a political tool, now felt like something sharper. A weapon. Mark. Carney entered the cabin, rain soaking his coat. He looked at her, not as an opponent anymore, but as something else. A reflection. A consequence. You have it all? He asked. Karoline nodded. Every file, every trigger, every name. And what do you want to do with it? She stared out at the waves. I want to end the illusion. Carney didn't move. Didn't speak. The silence between them was the kind you hear before something irreversible happens. They'll come for you, he said softly. They're already watching, she replied. But I'm not hiding anymore. Back in Washington, a private intelligence contractor received a message through an encrypted channel known only to 5 people in the world. It contained one phrase: Echo protocol breached. Prepare for reset. But it was too late. Karoline had already uploaded a public drop. Every file, every directive, every operative name. Not just from Project Halcyon, but from the shadow archives of 4 nations. Secrets not just about politicians, but artists, journalists, actors, influencers. People whose careers weren't accidents, but placements. Products of manipulation. And the people watched not with rage, not with silence, because deep down, some part of them already knew. In a closing shot, Karoline stood on the deck of the ship, wind in her hair, eyes fixed on the storm building across the Atlantic. Carney stepped beside her. No more masks. She said. No more control, he replied. And somewhere far beneath the sea, in a server vault once owned by an international banking syndicate, a single word appeared on every screen. Recalibrating. The world would never go back to what it was. And they were the ones who pulled the thread.